So, hello everybody. Give me 1 second. So, hello
Oh, that's
everybody.
me. Fuck.
Okay. So, where is these things? Okay, here we go. That'll work. Okay. So, I am gonna walk through. Where is it? I'm gonna zoom in on just the little mech guy for the beginning. Okay. Okay. Hello. Hi. How's it going? I recently made a thing. I 3D modeled, I made this. This is the swap mech from Into the Breach. I modeled it, I 3D modeled and designed it, printed it on a 3D printer, and then painted it. Kind of like how you would paint a mini, so that I could, I don't know. It was just fun. It was like a fun project of using all these kind of different things that I like. So we're gonna walk through that. Here, wait, I'll show you the end result on the computer because that would be a better way to show you. There we go. There we go. So there it is. There's the finished product. How did I make this? Dropped it on the floor. So that's not a good way to start. It's okay. I sprayed a bunch of matte finish on it the other day. Okay, so how did I make this? How did I make this little thing going from this little thing? This is the original reference that I took from Into the Breach, and then I scaled up in Photoshop. So I guess we could start with my goal. When I started the project, my goal was to kind of fully realize this little pixel art thing, because there wasn't more reference than this little pixel art guy in the game. It was just this. I was like, okay, so what am I kind of gonna make it look like? Am I just gonna 3D model those shapes? Am I gonna make it have like a bunch of wires and antennas? Like what style am I going for? I had all these questions. So I looked at some of the art that is Into the Breach in terms of like some of the concept art that I've seen for it and just the other mech styles. And overall, I would say that the flavor is kind of a mecha Japanese-ish inspired thing where essentially you've got like big mechs fighting kaiju, if you will. You know, these big mechanized fighting robots that all have different abilities. Fighting these space aliens. So it reminded me of like mecha, like anime mecha kind of stuff. So that was generally what I was going for. So with that in mind, I went and pulled a few references, kind of similar to this in style. So this right here was probably my biggest point of reference, which is somebody else made this on a 3D printer and painted it, and it's insane. It's insane quality. I can't even understand how they did this. This must have taken a long fucking time, and it's very impressive. But this is this is a mech from Ghost in the Shell, and overall something like this is kind of what I was going for. Something tank-like. It's kind of sleek, but then there's like big features on it, like these giant kind of bolts, these fans, and the features are sleek and kind of chunky in a way that I have a hard time explaining. It looks purpose built. It doesn't look like there's a lot of extra stuff on there, kind of dissimilar to this image where there's like a bunch of wires and cables and all these things. It's more purpose built to be a fighting big alien or fighting bad guy machine, right? And also I looked at their concept art. So this is a good way of understanding what they're kind of going for, and also what I was kind of looking. I looked at this a lot when I was modeling my thing. So it looks like an anime mech kind of concept to me. Like, it looks military-ish, but in a way that you would see more stylized, right? Like, obviously it's very it's very sci-fi, it's very future, but it's not super crunchy or fiddly. There's not a million details in here, right? All the elements are kind of... Why can't I scroll on? All right, whatever. But basically, you have big shapes, and then you have a few details on each part. It's not overwhelming with the amount of detail. Your eye is drawn to it, and it focuses on certain like strong elements, like this back here is kind of catching the gun, the shape, the overall shape of the gun, and there's like a little feature here. There's some smaller features here. There's like the leg basically has down here and here, but there's not a bunch of wires running all over it. There's not a bunch of designs and paint, and there's not like dirt all over it. It's like, it's kind of restrained. And so this is kind of what I was going for when I was designing the model that I was going to use eventually. So at first, I think this is pretty much the most basic the model was for a long time. Is I just got this general shape, and it looks really basic, right? I just have the general shape of the mech, with kind of strong corners and edges, because to me it kind of fit with the with that reference I just looked at with this. It's not, in just a little pixel art thing, it looks really kind of smooth and soft, but it's pixel art, so you just don't get a lot of definition, so you have to imagine kind of what's there, and I still imagined it being something like this, right? So that's kind of what I was going for with these basic shapes, is big bulky features, and then a few details to fill in, right? A few details to kind of like tell what is the mech doing. So it's a swap mech. It's swapping the place of it and some big bug or whatever you're fighting, right? So I was like, okay, so these are like these kind of... Maybe they're shields, but I imagine they're some part of the sci-fi mechanism that is doing the swapping on the front of it, right? It's always facing the thing that it's swapping with. So I imagine maybe these are doing something. Okay, so let's put these big design features into them, take these chunks out. The side has this kind of shape, put that in there. Just make it overall look like a sturdy object. I'm going to open up 3ds Max, and we can kind of look at the... Actually, I don't know if we have to. So after that, I did some tests. I printed that out to kind of see what it would look like. And I was pretty happy in terms of the results, but it still looked kind of weak and soft, and you can't see that. But it still looked kind of weak and soft and not purposeful necessarily. It just was shapes, right? I was like, okay, this is the basic idea. That's good. But I want to make it look stronger and more kind of focused on being in the field of battle, but also being kind of sci-fi. So inside this area, I just put some holes in, and I put some little dots there. These are kind of imagined to be big bolts. These could be like lights or something. There's this feature over here, or these vents. You kind of get this overall feeling of more purpose with the shapes, even if they aren't super well defined. It's like, well, what's it actually doing? I don't fucking know. I don't know how it would work. I'm not a mechanical designer. I'm not like a mechanical engineer figuring out how to fucking make make things magically swap with other shit. But overall, maybe these are exhausts, and these are things that are polarized. This is maybe for strength and design, and maybe these are catching the object and figuring out where to transport it to. It looks kind of industrial, looks kind of strong. Sure. I pulled the sides out a little bit to give it a better kind of side angle view, because it was so flat on the side. It wasn't the definition of that part just wasn't sticking out enough. Really, all the changes I made, like this part up here is cut out and raised, right? The reason that's cut out and raised is just because I thought that looked better. It made it look more purposeful than just a straight shaft, right? If we look at this. Okay, what's going on up here? I don't know. Like, all the shapes are kind of melting together, right? But then you pull them out all a little bit more. you make them broader, make them their own structures, and certainly it feels like it has a purpose. So that's kind of what I did with the 3D modeling there. I think when I reached this point, I was like, you know what? I'm looking at it from about here because I knew I was going to print it this scale, right? I knew this is how big I was going to print it. And I was like, okay, that looks good. I didn't want to add too much more detail because I knew I was going to have to paint it and sand it and do all this other stuff for post-processing. So I was like, that's probably adequate. I think that feels right. And really, it's hard because I was essentially just going off, I was going off this. I was like, in terms of design, is this clever enough? Is this interesting enough to look at? And I think I hit the right balance of adding more visual detail, but without adding clutter. So I was happy going from here and printing. So then I printed the part, and I think I have basically this. No, I have one step before it. But so then I printed it out, and I was pretty satisfied with the quality of the print. So now we're going to go into post-processing and finishing the part. I don't actually have pictures of the post-processing process, so I'll just load up the kind of final thing here. So basically, if you look at this, you can kind of see, my dog is trying to get my attention. You kind of see like these little lines that are in here, these little lines that are going across. It might be hard to see, but there's little lines going across the entire model. So when I was printing it, I did a few test prints. First, I printed it laying on its back, like flat, like that, right? And that ended up giving me, because of the way 3D printing works, or this type of 3D printing where you're melting a plastic and just the nozzle is moving up and up and up, painting down all these layers of plastic, it got a really ugly finish to the front of it, which is the part I care about the most. And it got a really ugly finish. I thought it would be better for like sturdiness of printing and making sure it didn't making sure it just printed successfully. But overall, it gave a really bad finish because you could see the layer shifts on the face really obviously. And I was like, not good. Going back to the drawing, like, all right, let's print it again. So I printed it just standing right side up like that. Here, let's use the model that has paint on it so you can kind of identify it. So then I just printed it standing up like this. And so that worked out better because then the layer lines were just going across it kind of in this way, but it wasn't just as ugly. It just didn't look as rough to look at, right? So I was like, okay, this printed pretty successfully. Let's move on to finishing it so you really don't see as many layer lines in the finished product, which was my goal. You can tell it's 3D printed. You can see some lines in here, but it's not horrible. It's not awful, but you can see it. So where I went from there was basically, okay, I looked up processes. Whenever I do something for the first time and I don't know what the fuck to do, I go on subreddits for the communities and I just Google and look at shit on Instagram. So I went on the Printed Minis subreddit and they have a bunch of guides for all these things and learning how to 3D print minis and then how to finish them and paint them and make them look really nice. And so I just went and read about, okay, well, how do you take the layer lines away and make it look clean? Basically, if you're printing FDM with these plastics and whatnot, people will sand it with a very light. So I went from a heavier grit, I think around 120 down to up to I think 220 or 300, somewhere in there, and really tried to wipe away as many layer lines as possible, but without erasing the detail. And by detail, I mean I didn't want to basically wipe the nubs off of the thing, right? I didn't want all of these little nubbins to come off. I didn't want you to not be able to see this indent here, or these edges here, this extrusion here. I want there to be definition on the model still. And that's the problem with FDM printing and sanding, is you can lose some definition. There are other ways to finish the model that I think I might do later on. One thing that makes it easier to finish the model is if it just prints cleaner and if the layer lines aren't as thick. I work at a place that sells 3D printers, and they sell much nicer 3D printers than the one I have at home. So I think in the future, I think I'm just going to take my STL or my OBJ, because I work in Autodesk, which outputs OBJs, and you can put that into slicing programs. So I think in the future I would just print it on a nice printer. I would just print it on a $5,000 FDM machine, or $2,000 or $3,000 FDM machine at work. Or hopefully maybe in the future I could get like a cheap SLA printer like the Anycubic Photon, or one of these other cheap SLA home 3D printers. But this is what I got. So I got all these. I'm like, all right, so let's sand it. So I sand it down, clean it up. After the sanding process, because it's plastic, acrylics and paints won't stick to it super well, so you should use a primer. So I just used a big spray can white primer that people recommended for painting miniatures, because you have to do that with your minis too. You have to prime them first. So I sprayed all these. I sprayed it with a primer, left it there for a bit, sanded it down. So after you spray it with the primer, you kind of want to clean up, because there might be little flakes or little dots of the primer. So then I took the really light sandpaper, cleaned up the primer, primed it again, cleaned it up again with sandpaper, primed it 3 times, cleaned it up 3 times with sandpaper. After that, I'm like, okay, I guess we're going to paint. I've never painted a miniature. I was like, I guess we're going to paint a miniature now. So I looked up a bunch of stuff on the 3D printing, on the printed minis, or 3D printing minis. What is the name of the subreddit? Let me tell you guys, because it's really a great resource. Printed minis. So it's basically for a 3D printing subreddit. So I went there and I saw work that I really liked. And I went to their Instagram pages. I watched YouTube videos they posted. And also the people, I was like, hey, this is really cool. So I commented on some of the posts I thought were great. I'm like, how'd you do this? And they're like, here's a great video that explains it. Here's all the material I use. People like told me everything. They're like, I use this. So I went and bought a couple of weeks ago. I got like Soldier mini paints. I think they're acrylic based. The sanding stuff, the brushes they recommended, and that was basically it. I kind of was trying to be a little cheap, not spend too much money, because this stuff isn't cheap. The paints are expensive, brushes are expensive, all this stuff is pretty expensive. So I was like, all right, how do you paint this? So I watched some YouTube videos. Basically, the way you paint these minis in a base level to get it just like to be moderately successful is do a base color paint. So I painted it all kind of the purplish reddish color as the base. Then I did a dry brush next, and I think I should do the dry brush last, because the video I watched was like, then we'll do the dry brushing and then you do a wash. And the wash is to essentially give shadows and darkness in like these places, like here and in these corners and these little pits and over here. It's to give a darker color in all those areas, and like right here, like this, right? It's just to kind of add depth to it. And the same thing of the dry brushing is you're just adding detail to these edges, make it look, like it has sharper edges, or it just sticks out more, really amplify the 3D effect of the model. So I did the base layer. Then I did the base layer for all the other colors, the other 2 colors on the model, which is this gray up here for like the metal and the head, whatever, at the center of the eye thing, and then the lens, which is this blue. So after I had those down, then I did the the edges with the dry brush. Then I did the wash to get in those dark colors, and then I went back and touched them both up a little bit. I did a little bit more washing, kind of by hand, where so washing is just you have a very watered down base paint that seeps into those edges, and then I kind of wiped it off of the higher areas that I didn't want to get darker. And then I went back and touched up some corners and things to kind of amplify the dry brushing effect, to really sharpen up some corners and try and make it pop a little bit more. I think I did okay. After that, I basically went and added all the detail spots. So little white on the tops here on these corners. If you can see them, they're all a little bit white. I painted these bolts, I guess, or whatever those would be. I painted all those on those corners. I painted the white here and there and there. Really, because there's not too much detail on this, you know, I was able to kind of do it in these phases that like felt natural and good. And like, because it wasn't an organic object, there wasn't a lot of guesswork. It's like, first I do the base coat, then I do this, then I do that. Just following those steps really made it easy. For someone, I've never printed a mini before. I've never done this before, so it was good to kind of research that stuff and do that beforehand. Also, I kind of used, so this thing is two-sided, but I'm thinking of presenting it a way in the future that you would only look at the front. So I also used the back to kind of do some color and guesswork, and so that was also helpful. Is like, if you, the first time you do it, maybe just print two of the thing, and one is your test, and then one is your finish. You know, you can do it once on one, and then go back to the other one. You can kind of do it at the same time. You don't have to fully finish two models. You can kind of, you know, check things first. Okay, how dark should my wash be? How light should my dry brushes be? How much paint should I have on the thing when I dry brush? Is this too much? Okay, that's too much. Let's try a little less paint. Okay, that's better. You know, having two things to try it on really helped me a lot. Sorry, I'm getting jerked around by my dog right now. He's trying to... Okay, go over there. Anyway. So having two things to try it on could be very useful. What was I saying? Okay, so I finished that painting process, and you know, after that, I went back, you know, and I touched up these corners. I brought in some other highlights and stuff. I added like this little kind of lens thing going on here, tried to make it look like, you know, it was like shing. You know, like there's a little shine hitting the lens. I think that was a good detail to add. And so then the next point would be doing a matte spray, like a matte finishing spray over it so that the paint doesn't get scraped off if I drop the model. I probably might even spray it again with the matte finish just to make sure it's really good, you know, so that if I bring it around and show it to people, it really doesn't get messed up. So here's the thing that no one told me, and I thought, okay, if this happens, it would be bad, but it wouldn't be the end of the world, and it was kind of the end of the world. It wasn't really, but... So I sprayed it with the matte spray outside, because it's, you know, I'm like an aerosol can, and after I sprayed it with the matte spray, it kind of flopped on its front, like the good side, and I picked it up, and I was like, that's not a huge deal. Picked it up, and, like, it was bad. Like, all the paint, like, not all the paint, but, like, big chunks, like a chunk here and a chunk there and a chunk here and a chunk there and a chunk there, all like kind of scraped off. And I was like, whoa, not just the finish, but like the paint, it had dried. I waited until all the paint was dry. And so all this paint kind of came up. Fargo, I'm done playing with you, man. All this paint came up after I sprayed the finish, like the matte finish on it. And I was like, what the fuck is this about, man? Not great. Like, not a great time here. That's bad. So I took it in. I took it in, and I had to recreate the colors of the paints. And I essentially had to refinish a bunch of it. You know, I had to fill in all those little missing spots and try and blend in. I think I actually did a good job. No one's really mentioned, like, hey, this looks really fucked up. I can see it. I know where the little fuck-ups are on it from that incident. And so I had to blend them in when, I had to blend them in, and it took like another 2 hours of painting to fix that fuck up. After that though, I was like, okay, gonna make sure this doesn't happen again. So I took a little strip of PLA, like the 3D printing material, and fed it through like the hole in the mech. So like in here, through, and then up, and I just like held it with like the PLA strand, and then I laid it on its back, sprayed it, let it dry for like a minute, sprayed it again, like gave it a good like coating. I was like, okay, that's good enough for now. I'm probably gonna spray it again tonight, with doing the same method so I don't destroy it. But so, and I was like, okay, cool. So that was basically it in terms of finishing this model up. For taking this picture, I think a lot of people, when they present their work, don't do a great job. This was one thing that was kind of beaten into me when I was in school for 3D art. was like, hey, hey, you spent all this time modeling this thing. Make sure you show it off really well. You gotta, you gotta make sure it looks really freaking good when they see it. Not just like, okay, you can 3D model. Present it well. So I think something that kind of helps people look past maybe the model, the painting being amateurish is like it's presented pretty well. So I just took a sheet of what they call newsprint. I have like this big, like a huge drawing book. It's this big drawing book. It's got this really cheap paper in it. It's called newsprint. You buy it for like some not expensive amount of money. I tore a sheet out. I laid it over some magazine, turned on 2 lights, so you have 2 points of light. You can see there's a shadow underneath it. There's a shadow here, so my main light was over here. Sorry, hold on. I'm not drawing over the right screen. So this is from the skylight in my living room, and this is just from like a lamp that I put in front of it. So you kind of get these 2 lighting references, and it kind of gives you a dramatic effect to the lighting, right? And also, it's this nice clean background, and I put because it's a mini, because it's a small thing, I want people to know. So I put a little quarter there. It's you put a little thing there. Also, hey, okay, so I'm showing you, this is the SWAT mech. You know what the SWAT mech looks like, right? This is kind of aimed, I'm doing it for myself, but I want people who like Into the Breach to be able to recall like what I am making this from. So I took this screenshot from the game. I went to Photoshop, made it bigger. When you're scaling up pixel art and you want to make sure the pixel art stays sharp, you have to change 2 settings. There's a general settings for scaling things up, and you choose nearest neighbor for scaling to make the pixel stay hard. And you have to do the same thing when you actually change the image size. It'll bring up that little drop down again. Make sure to also make that nearest neighbor. And that keeps the pixels. It's basically just saying like, keep the lines hard. Don't blur when you're scaling or resizing items. So that's that. So then I blew that up and I put that on there so that you see it and you're like, oh wow, this is the thing that it's based off of, and he got this from it. It's kind of supposed to also help with like the wow, like, hey, I put in this design work. I thought about what would the thing maybe look like if it was like a big mech, right? Like this big military vehicle kind of thing, right? So that's why you put it there, is because it's like, I got this from that, right? I put in work. I put an effort to get to this point. So that's just a side thing. Presentation matters, and it helps people like your work. If you put in this is 2%. 2% at the end of doing this thing to make it look like this. I think it worked out pretty well. Fuck me. Come back here. So, that's not it though. This is not the end of this little project. One, he's only one of 3 mechs in the Flame Behemoth squad, the SWAT mech. I want to make the other ones. I'm planning on making the 2 other mechs. The one is like an artillery mech. It's like a tank kind of thing. And the other one's like this big, it's like a prime mech. It looks like a walker, it has like legs and arms and it shoots flames. I think that one looks really cool. I think I'm going to do the tank kind of one first, because it's more complicated than this, but it's not as complicated as the walker. So I'll take it one step at a time. But even for the SWAT mech, the little project is actually not fully done yet. So I'm doing this kind of box art presentation of it, and when I say box art, I mean I want to put it in like a little piece of packaging that looks like you could sell it on a shelf, like a toy or a figure at a store, right? So I went out and stole, I downloaded whatever, this wallpaper for Into the Breach, and then I found lettering that people said was similar to the Into the Breach lettering, and then, hi Omni, are you streaming? And then, so I went out and I made this font that looks, the font doesn't just look like this. I had to, there's many layers. There's like a shadow layer, there's a highlight layer, there's like a glow effect layer to the font to make it kind of look like this, right? So I put SWAT mech there. I put the image of the thing. I put like a glow around it, this white outline around it. So I'm going to, this just looks, it's just like a blank area. But what I'm going to do is, So we have like a vinyl printer cutter at the office. I'm going to print it out on that. And it's going to cut it out in like, with rounded corners so I can put it on like a piece of cardboard. And then I'm going to use a vacuum forming machine to essentially all 3D model a negative of this, like a blocky version of this, use the vacuum former to suck down this plastic. That way you could put the model in it and then you could like stick it on the cardboard, put the little vacuum form plastic on the cardboard and make it look like, like a toy. So what I haven't done so far, so this is the basic art for the front. You can kind of just imagine him sitting in this big empty area here. But I also want to make a back that kind of like talks about the swap mech and what it does. I might have to write up like the swap mech is designed for this and, like give it some like fake in fiction writing or whatever. And just kind of make it look cool, probably use the same this, but maybe not have the title here. I might take that off the back or maybe I'll keep it. I might blow up the image of the size of the swap mech on the piece when I print it out. So this is kind of bigger on the back part. But yeah, that's kind of my plan, is so that this will sit in there in like this plastic packaging and look like a little toy. And, the edges will be rounded and cut off. And I want like a little cutout here so you could hang it on a hook and all that stuff. That's kind of my goal. And the other reason part of the reason that I did this and I'm doing this is because I work at a place that sells 3D printers and laser cutters and vinyl print cut machines. So basically all the things that I need to make this, except for the painting aspect. They don't do anything with like that finishing stuff. But basically I could package this kind of whole thing that I did in a way and show it to educators and be like, hey, if you're teaching like design, or we sell 3D printers to people who are teaching 3D modeling, 3D design classes, and saying like, hey, this is like a whole project. I mean, this is a relatively involved project that you could do. It could, even take a semester or whatever. It could take a while, but I mean, it's just an idea to get people excited about the products. And if they buy multiple things, I mean, I did this for myself, but also it has the nice benefit of I can show it off at work and they'll be like, awesome, Matt, thanks. That's is a nice benefit of this. It's going to resize in a second. I know it didn't resize. That's crazy. There it goes. I knew it. I don't know what the hell the thing is with like Windows 10, this photo thing, but I fucking hate it. So, anyway, so yeah, that's where this is all going. I'm hoping to do that this week at work. Maybe I'll stay late one night and do that. It shouldn't take too long. Really, the most of the work is done outside of work for me, making the graphics. Actually printing it doesn't take long. Cutting the cardboard out with the laser with the line that I'm going to take from the other cut line for the print, putting it on the laser, cutting the cardboard. Well, those two things take 15 minutes to actually print. I just take it home, stick it on there because it's just a big vinyl sticker. Stick the vinyl onto the cardboard. Use the vacuum. I'll have to 3D print the the negative. I have to 3D print the negative, vacuum form it. That takes a little bit of time. I'll cut out that sheet of plastic so it like fits well onto the thing. But really it should only take like a few days to do that. The only thing that I'm struggling with if I want to do it or not is if I want to actually seal in this thing, seal in the little model on the packaging. I was thinking of doing that, especially because I like holding it, but also because the back is like this unfinished piece of trash that you don't like to look at. This is the good side. This is the trash side. The trash side in person really looks like trash because it just didn't get as much sanding love. But I kind of figured I was going to be presented in that way, so it's all right. The only thing is, though, if I do seal it in like that, then I can't present all the models kind of together. So that's something. And I do kind of want to be able to present them all sitting next to each other on this kind of, hey, look, it's my dog. I do want to kind of present them all together, like on this, essentially like this on this white sheet of paper with them all standing next to each other. So, I think maybe I might cut a hole in the back of the packaging or like cut a little slit in the bottom of the plastic so I can like slide the piece of bottom of the plastic out and then pull the model out and be like, hey, look, and then put it back in the thing. But I'll figure it out. Details. But yeah, that's basically it. That's the whole process. It's, Honestly, if the reason I'm doing this is because I think this was a really fun way to combine the different things that I like about my job and kind of my personal interest in these hobbies and the 3D printing and the art aspect and the design aspect of the hobby. And I think if you can 3D model, like if you have some decent 3D modeling skills, then this is like honestly, it's like a fun way to just show off your work, show off what because 3D printing is not crazy difficult to get into. You just need to know the basics of how it works. So if you can export an OBJ or an STL from your 3D modeling program or your CAD package, then you can 3D print it pretty much. There's other programs that can make sure your model is viable to print, so you don't even have to worry about like, well, what's really going on. It can't be like, you can pretty much 3D print anything under a certain scale. So I don't know. It was kind of just a neat way to really get more into 3D printing, and I sometimes miss 3D modeling pretty things, and this isn't crazy complicated or impressive, but it was like a fun little 3D modeling project. It was fun to print it and make sure that, my little dinky 3D printer at home, like, kind of get some use out of that, and then painting it was like a fun way. It just feels nice to do. So anyway, that's it. If you're interested in maybe seeing what comes next of this project, I guess follow my Twitter. There's a link below the stream for my Twitter. Just go click on that, and follow me there. I actually didn't tweet a picture of this because I was kind of saving it. I guess I'll tweet a picture of this, and then I'll tweet again and tag the developers once I get the packaging done. That was what I want to do. I want to essentially be like, hey, developers, check out what I'd made for your game. Cool, right? So yeah, follow me on Twitter. You can also, if you want to go follow me, I guess on Reddit, that's where I'm kind of posting these things and like talking to people about them. I posted it in the 3D printing in the printed mini subreddit. So if you want to follow my Reddit or friend me on Reddit or whatever, I don't know if you can do that, but I'm just the Clink, TheKlinck on Reddit. If you want to go find this post and keep track of the stuff that I'm making, you can do that. I'm also have a Thingiverse now for downloading. So if you want to download this model, my Thingiverse name is also the same. I guess I'll have to link to my Reddit and Thingiverse soon. So my Thingiverse name is also the Clink, TheKlinck. And you can download the OBJ and print this model. So you can go get this and print it and have it for if you want to paint it, if you just want to print it and look at the little model, that's neat too. It'll be posted tomorrow on there because I just made this account today and they don't let you post anything until a day. So they make you wait 24 hours before posting. So that's it. Go follow me on on Twitter pretty much, and I'll link to the other things on Twitter. Go follow me on Twitter, and also on Thingiverse if you want to download the OBJ file to 3D print for yourself. I had been streaming a bunch of Into the Breach. Now I'm just going to talk about my stream for a little bit because I do this from time to time. I have like stream stints where I'm like, yeah, let's stream video games, and I'm like, I should do other things. I had like a several week long stint where I was just playing hard mode random teams of Into the Breach, and it was a lot of fun. The thing is, I don't like streaming working on the project. It's not interesting. I mean, it might be interesting to watch, but I get too distracted with the chat. I get too distracted with talking to people to actually work and stream. I don't know how some people do that. That looks really hard to me. So I'm not going to stream actually working on this stuff. I'll just kind of vomit out the process after I'm done doing it. Just for me, really. Some people might find it interesting, but it's really just for me to talk about. Yeah. So if you want, also, if you're probably already following me on Twitch, but follow me on Twitch. I sometimes play games. I've been playing Hitman. I'll probably play some Hitman over the holiday break, and maybe even tomorrow I might just stream Hitman. I also might stream me and my friend Jean-Luc. My friend Jean-Luc is a video editor and producer at GameSpot, which you might have heard of, is a website. We do a podcast pretty much quarterly because we're just two busy people with work and everything. We do a podcast like once in a while called The Video Game Babies, where we just talk about all the stuff, video game news, trends, things, whatever we've been playing. We're probably going to do our Game of the Year podcast recording tomorrow, and I probably will stream it. I always like it when we talk to each other about games because it's like a big... I don't know, we don't like the same things, but it's interesting to get... I think it's nice getting his perspective on stuff. Because he's like knee deep in it, and I came from making games and just following the industry now. And generally speaking, I'm very critical of games and things that are happening in the industry, where I think he celebrates them a lot, and I, generally speaking, am maybe just more negative than he is. So I always just like talking to him about stuff. And we have a good time. So we're going to like do our big Game of the Year. Let's talk about video games and what's going on thing. The podcast is like, honestly, it's like, I think we probably have like 10 or 15 subscribers to it, but we just do, it's probably just like people we know that will listen to us talk about games once a quarter. We did an E3 podcast, and now we're going to do an end of the year podcast probably. So anyway, that's it. I'll be around tomorrow, maybe. See ya.